Now, despite South Africa having an established retirement savings system, the costs associated with this are expensive by international norms. Government, led by National Treasury, is determined to change this and has embarked on a program of reform. Earlier, Warren Dick spoke to Dani van Zyl, head of guaranteed investments at Sanlam Employee Benefits. That's to unpack the likely path of change coming to the retirement industry.
Dani, thanks for joining us on Investment 360.
It's a pleasure.
You've obviously got the survey that you do every year, and it reveals a lot about South Africans' attitude to their retirement savings. Just tell us a little bit about the survey initially, and then we can get on to some of the conclusions that you've reached from studying that.
Okay, great. We've been doing this survey for the last 3 decades, and basically there's 3 components. We talk to principal officers of standalone funds, we talk to the participating employers of umbrella funds, and we go and talk to members and pensioners as well. We try and keep the pensioners and members separately. You get fascinating insights on the pensioners. They've been through the whole retirement process already, and just see what their advice is to people actually still saving for retirement.
We've got this big problem in South Africa where we've got obviously a very well established retirement savings program and industry, yet the figures that we see for people that reach their retirement and are able to provide sufficient income to live comfortably at a standard that they've become accustomed to is so low. So that's a fundamental problem. Your surveys identified some of the problems that the members themselves have with regards to their attitudes. Just tell us a little bit about those.
We're focusing on member behavior because to a large extent a lot of what's wrong in the system is driven by behavior, and you need to understand behavior and then see how you can change it. And unfortunately, members are members, they're normal human beings, normal biases and failings. A young person in his 20s, he's worried about buying a new car, buying a house, then he gets married, and he's worried about putting the kids through school. Retirement fund savings is often the last thing they worry about. They start worrying about it 5 years prior to retirement. So to a large extent, members suffer from apathy. They're indifferent to retirement savings, and they believe as long as they've ticked the box and they contribute to a fund, someone else will take care of it, and it's someone else's problem. And they don't really understand how much they're saving, how much they're putting away, and what the likely end result is they're going to get at retirement. Often it's quite a shock to them when they actually reach retirement to see, I've been saving this long and this is the only amount I'm getting out.
So the first side of it is obviously that people think that this thing is just going to take care of itself. Is that a throwback perhaps to the defined benefit industry?
I do believe so. In the old DB days, in the defined benefit fund, your pension was defined in the fund rules, and depending on how many years you worked and all of that. And prestige, you guaranteed that. Now in a defined contribution fund, you build up a pot of money, but when you get to retirement, you need to use your pot of money and buy an annuity in the market. And to a large extent, members don't really understand that. They still expect their trustees to look after them when they actually reach retirement.
So, and I think the fact that people battle to grasp this idea that this thing is, could be 30 years away, could be 40 years away, depending on your age, but getting it right from the beginning is so important to that end result. So they kind of disassociated it from a perspective of time.
Definitely. People discount things that happen in the future, and they said, I'll start saving more for retirement, when I'm closer to retirement. Unfortunately, it's your savings when you're in your 20s that earn the most interest compounded over time when you reach retirement. So unfortunately, you need to start saving from day one. And often people, when they change jobs in the early 20s, even 30s, they go, this is a small amount of money, it doesn't going to mean anything, let me take the money now and I use it as a down payment on a car, without realizing this actually has a major impact on how much they actually have when they reach retirement.
That withdrawal benefit is one of the things that I think National Treasury are targeting going forward. Just how much damage is it to a person's ultimate retirement result by taking out those withdrawals when they change jobs or if they're unemployed?
It's quite dramatic. When you ask even the pensioners, are they on track, you got a sort of a vague answer that some of them are on track, but those who actually have taken the money earlier, they know that they have a problem, and yet they made a decision. And what we find is it's often not people who sitting and lost a job and they're sitting at home and they need the money to pay, to put food on the table. The number one thing people do when they change jobs and they take the money in cash, 70% of them actually take it in cash, is they pay off short-term debt. That's like credit cards and shop cards and those kind of things. And unfortunately, that just has a tendency to grow again when you change your job. And the second thing they do is pay long-term debt. So when people actually reach retirement, that money is gone. They don't have it anymore to pay for their retirement.
We talk about this problem, why are people doing these things? They're making these decisions that are against their best interests over the long term. And we talk about things like financial literacy and education. Do you think that the process is a little bit flawed? At the beginning you mentioned that people just come in and fill forms in and then expect to be catered for when they retire. Does the industry need to do a little bit more at the beginning and during the process of saving for retirement to educate their members properly?
Initially, when people started looking at these results, and I mean ourselves as well in the early 2000s, you thought, member education is the answer. And trustees spent a lot of money, and funds spent a lot of money on educating members and fine-tuning the communication to members. And I'm not belittling the contribution communication does, but to a large extent, it didn't change member behavior. People want just-in-time communication. It doesn't help talking to a 20-year-old about retiring. He doesn't want to know about it. And to a certain extent, we think you need to go a step further. It's actually, you need to guide members through default choices every time it makes a decision. So when he starts on day one, have a default contribution rate, have default levels of life cover and disability cover. So he just ticks a box and he takes it. When he changes job, have a default preservation option. When he gets to retirement, have a default annuity option. So everywhere you can, you try to nudge members into the right direction. It's behavioral economics. If you don't do it, then to a certain extent they might end up hurting themselves and destroying a lot of value. And often people don't understand it in advance. They only realize that when they actually retire how much damage they've done to themselves.
Do you think there's a case to be made for taking this concept of education and financial literacy even further back to the point where it's taught in schools and almost as a compulsory subject to a certain degree, so that people are aware not only of these decisions but general decisions around how compound interest works both on lending and in savings?
I think it would be wonderful. I mean, one of the concerns we have is our financial literacy is actually quite low. I mean, even on school funds, funds where most of the people have schooling and have degrees, people often don't really understand the impact of this and how money, if you save it for a 20, 30-year period, how it compounds. And the whole idea of compound interest and the benefit of that is something that very few people understand. And I think if members understand a bit more and learn already at school, it will obviously help. But to a certain extent, there will still be a large proportion of members who say, this is sometime in the future, I have other priorities, I need to focus on other things right now.
We've seen that National Treasury want to make the trustees the sort of custodian of people's decisions and really give care to what that default option is, because that seems to be in most cases where people just accept what the default option is without really giving thought to the different options they're presented with in a retirement savings structure, for instance. So what's your take on that? I wanted to understand, with trustees now, which are usually the same people that are the savers in the fund, now taking more, or seeming like they're going to be taking more responsibility for this, what needs to change to make that happen and allow that to be effective?
Well, there's a couple of proposals mooted. First of them, fit and proper type requirements for trustees. Should trustees have a minimum qualification, for instance? Unfortunately, you don't want to exclude the shop stewards and people working on the factory floor. A board of trustees need to represent all members. But definitely, I think there's more responsibility on trustees, but also members need to play their part. What we found with just showing member apathy is, for instance, we ask your average member, do you vote for trustees? Because members appoint half the board of trustees. Only a third of them vote for trustees. We ask members, can you actually name just one of the members of the board of trustees? Only a third can. But it's very interesting, 70% of them invest in a default and investment choice, and we ask the members, why do you invest in a default? 8 out of 10 say it's because they trust the trustees to make the right decisions. Even though they don't vote for them, they can't name them, they still do trust the trustees. So it's a sort of a paternalistic expectation that members have that trustees will look after them. And it's quite interesting, when you actually talk to trustees, their view is very different. They have a trust fiduciary duty, they need to comply with fund rules, they need to comply with governance, and that's where it stops for many trustees. We ask trustees, for instance, are you concerned with what members do for retirement money when they retire? And 3/4 of them are concerned. Then we ask the same trustees, do you want any further involvement with members? Only 1/4 want any further involvement with members after retirement. Their view is, at retirement, their responsibility starts with members now on its own. And unfortunately, you need trustees to actually take a step further and help guide members into retirement as well.
So it's quite two, I guess, opposing ends. One with expectations, and the other one looking at the responsibility and
Yes.
saying we're not supposed to be the paternalistic custodian of a person's savings. So the push from National Treasury now is on a number of fronts, and trustees is one of them. The other one is costs, obviously.
Yes.
We've got a very established, well-administered retirement savings system in South Africa. It's not producing the results. National Treasury believe that much of that can be addressed through lowering costs. How do you expect that to play out going forward with the legislation they want to introduce?
Well, one of the biggest problems we have is economies of scale. Unfortunately, we had a very fragmented system. Every employer wanted to take care of his members, even though there's no compulsion for him to do so, started his own pension fund. And you end up with a lot of retirement funds that are actually very small and don't have economies of scale, not viable. And until the late 90s, it wasn't an alternative vehicle for these guys to actually pool their members into an umbrella fund, which we have now. What we've seen is there's a big push from especially smaller funds to join an umbrella fund, and we see the benefits of that. In our survey, for instance, if you look at a small fund with less than 500 members compared to a big fund with like more than 5,000, their admin cost is double that of the large fund. That's a significant cost you actually pay, and if you compound it over the long term, over 30, 40 years, it does affect your payout you're going to get. So we do find these smaller funds are not viable, their costs are higher, so it makes sense for them to join bigger umbrella funds. And in a big umbrella fund, there's economies of scale and it reduces costs as well. Although much more can be done, I think it's the first step in the right direction, and we actually do see the benefits of that in our survey.